What's up, y'all? Peace. So, like back in the day, right? I used to live in a part of Brooklyn that was in the border between Midwood and Bensonhurst. We lived there quite a few times. I always go back to my old neighborhood. Eventually, we moved back to the old hood, Williamsburg. But at that time, we were living there, and it was a lot of stuff going on. But in particular, I was there. I was there for the latter part of the 80s and then the 90s. So, the mafia ran everything over there. And I got so many, I wouldn't say crazy, but kind of like interesting stories over there. But one interesting story I gotta say was this was like a year after 1989. This was 1990, February 1990. So in 89, probably 88, but definitely 89, you had like the Central Park 5 out in Manhattan, right? The whole situation with that. Around that same time, this is like early 89, Yusuf Hawkins was killed not too far away from where I was living at, where me and my mom was living at. And he was chased, he was shot and killed by a white mob, white gangs. It's not a white, you call it a mob, it's gangs. It was a lot of white. Brooklyn is big. Brooklyn is bigger than what some people think. So it was a lot of white gangs too, back then. A lot. Including skinheads. There was skinheads over there. I didn't see them until way later on, before I moved. But, so you had Yusuf Hawkins, and then around that time, also in 89, it might have been late 88, but I feel like it's 89. I was 10 years old at that time. There was another black kid that got chased out in that same section. They tried to beat him up, but he ran into the street and got killed by a truck. So it was a lot of situations like that going on in Brooklyn. And in general, that racial tension in New York City was out-sharpened, right? But, so it was a lot going on at that time. And I ain't go front though. Some Italians were listening to Kiss FM and Hot 97. Yeah, it was. But it was mostly still kind of racist and segregated in the Bensonhurst side. Midwood, I found out Midwood was a segregated neighborhood before we moved there. But by the time we moved there, it was different. The super was Jamaican. There were Chinese people living in my building. It was already kind of like, at least in that section, it was changing. But at the time, so all that is going on in 1989. Now, I'm still a kid, so I started listening to the radio, and I'm listening to music, and the music is real positive. And I remember that summer of 89, the commercials for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. I remember that. 1989 was an incredible year as a kid for me. Just finally listening to the radio and hearing all the different kinds of music that was getting played, depending on what radio station I was listening to. I was mostly listening to Hot 97 because they used to play a lot of Puerto Rican artists. I'm Puerto Rican, so that was kind of cool. But the next year, 1990, it was still winter time, right? And this Sunday, my mother's cousin came early. She came to visit all the way from Williamsburg. And so we chilling. I'm in my mother's room. They're in the kitchen, and I'm in my mother's room. I don't know why. Usually I'm in the living room. But I was listening, I believe I was listening to either her radio or I had the Walkman. I don't remember. It might have been because I was listening to my mother's radio that she gave to me later on, a boombox that she had for a long time. It's an ill boombox, a Sharp. If anybody remembers 2-speaker Sharps, you know what I'm saying? And I was listening to High 97, and I remember they were playing Janet Jackson, Escapade. They were playing the 12-inch version, and there's a knock on the door. We used to live on the last floor, 4th floor, tenement building. You know, if you're from Brooklyn, you know, brown tenement building. So, get a knock on the door. My mother's cousin is looking. Also, we got the peephole, and they let him in. It's a white kid, like a real white kid, blonde hair, freckles, you know. And he's saying that some kids want to beat him up. So I'm like, oh shit, okay. So, and he's he told my mother he was 15. So he's 15 years old. And so they go to the room. They told him to stay in her bedroom. So he's across from me, but on the rocking chair. My mother had the rocking chair that my grandmother used to have, that I think her mother had. I mean, it's an old rocking chair. We had that forever. And we finally got rid of it. It was sad. I used to sit in there too. But he sat on the rocking chair. And so they went to, you know, the living room window to look out. So I go too, because I'm my mother's cousin says something. My mother's cousin's kind of, you know, hard, ghetto, you know what I'm saying? So she's saying something out the window. So I'm getting a little nervous because I'm 11 years old at the time. So I look out the window and I see a whole, and you know, Sunday, if you live in a residential neighborhood, you know, Sundays is kind of quiet. Even though we used to live right by the F train, the trains are slower unless they're fixing. Sometimes on weekends they fix. But the residential neighborhood is slow. We got the corner store back across the street back then down the block. But everything's closed. The older shops are closed. Those were the older shops that were run by the mob. They were closed. Everything, you know, and then, you know, houses and tenement buildings everywhere. So we lived kind of like on the dead-end street on Avenue O, and then it starts on the other side. Then you have Dudley Road to the left, and then 64th Street starts sideways on the left. You know what I'm saying? And it goes deeper into Bensonhurst. So, and then on the other side is the F train, McDonald Avenue, which is a little bit more busier. But Sundays, it's kind of dead and quiet, right? So I go to look out the window, and there's like it's like a whole bunch of like Italian kids, like a whole bunch of them, like they're all like teenagers, high school teenagers, you know what I'm saying? And they're brolic, you know, them Italian kids, they're already working out. Most of them have fathers, so their fathers teach them how to work out. You know, a lot of us don't have fathers, so a lot of us either are too skinny or too fat, you know what I'm saying? These guys were fit, I mean, and there was a bunch of them, and they was all up and down the street. They were blocking the whole street because there's no traffic, no cars, nobody's doing anything on a Sunday in the wintertime in a residential neighborhood. And it was crazy. So he told my mother and her cousin that his sister was across the street pacing back and forth. She's on the phone. She looks kind of nervous. And they're calling him out, like, come outside so you would get it. You know what I'm saying? They were trying to get in. I don't know if they got in or not, because sometimes the super will be out on the weekends, and sometimes the door will be open. Sometimes it'll be locked. You know, it was 2 doors to get into the building. So it's like a little lobby before you get into the main lobby. And you got staircases on both sides of the building. So, you know. So they were there for a while. My mother's cousin, you know, she goes Brooklyn on them. She tells, you know, get up, blah, 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 blah. They stayed there for a while. So I'm looking, I'm like, damn. So eventually they left. Eventually. So my mother's plan was to walk him back to his building. So we walk him back to the building. Eventually, we had to wait. And we live all the way in the last floor. So we got to make sure that the coast was clear, even when we went down. So all three, we all go outside. And then it's cold. It's freezing. And And we walk him, and he doesn't live in Benson. He lives on the Midwood side. He lives like a block over from, 2 blocks over, or half a block. He lives on the other side of the F train. So he lives in Midwood. You know what I'm saying? And you know, you could tell if somebody looks, even if they're white, you could tell if they're Italian, Irish, or Dutch. Or, you know what I'm saying? This kid looked like his family was Dutch or something. You know what I mean? Like real white, but not Irish. Even though he had almost like kind of like blonde hair, he could have been, but I don't think he was. And you know, most of the white gangs in Bensonhurst are all Irish and Italian. So we walk him. You know, past the F train, and the next street, East 2nd Street, we make a right turn, and you know, it's like a bunch of nice little houses in that area. There's bigger houses on the Avenue O on that side, and then there's smaller houses. But right in the middle is a small tenement building, and he lived right there. My mother was like, "Oh shit, you live right here?" So we walk him. He says thank you. He says be careful, don't hang out on that side. And then I remember my mother telling me, see, don't hang out on that side when you get older. You know what I'm saying? Like, because we already knew, and, you know, my mother already knew that even though we used to walk that side, we never had a problem. My mother used to walk that side because she used to go to a bank on East 2nd and Avenue P. But that bank closed down, so we started going to a bank, and I would say it's 18th Avenue, either on 18th Avenue or before 18th Avenue, or Bay Parkway. But even to get to Bay Parkway, it's a little walk. It's a walk. And I used to love the walks. My mother used to take me. I used to love those walks. You know, that's one thing I appreciate. My mother used to love walking. She never took only in the winter time we would take the bus back, especially coming back. But that's the only time. And then we go to 18th Avenue to shop, because that's open for everybody, you know. And my mother's best friend in 87, my mother's best friend moved to Bensonhurst. But she moved to a section where there was a lot of fruit stores, and so it was kind of like some immigrants there. But it was borderline Bensonhurst because it was not too far away from the cemetery. Once you get to the cemetery, 22nd Avenue, it's not Bensonhurst anymore. So it was like, okay, you know. And it was a nice little house, and she moved in with her boy who became her husband, and then, rest in peace, you know. And, you know, he passed away a long time ago, 2000. So I remember my mother telling me, you know, when you get older, don't walk on that side. And she don't do that. So something like that. So you know what I'm saying? When I got older, I already knew. You know what I'm saying? Because around that time, the white kids used to talk about the skinheads that used to be on that side. So I never hung out on that side, you know? And when we were walking them, I remember I was turning around. I was paranoid, you know, because you're from Brooklyn, you're already paranoid from all the crazy shit that's going on. And then, you know, in school, you know, you're constantly getting into fights with other kids. I mean, I was paranoid already. So I'm like looking around, and because I don't know if these Italian kids are going to come back and beat them up right in front of my mother, because kids, you know, in this society, kids don't care. Like, they'll beat somebody up in front of an older woman, you know what I'm saying? Like, and my mother was still young at that time. My mother was like late 30s, early 40s, you know, close to my age. So she was young at that time still. But my mother's cousin was with us. She was ghetto, so I felt kind of safe. You know, and she's big, you know. But I was nervous, and I'm looking around. But once we got to East 2nd Street, I felt a little safer because that wasn't their territory. So Midwood is considered, I always consider it in the immigrant section of Brooklyn, because there's a lot of immigrants that live in Midwood. You got like Hasidic Russian Jews and people from Bangladesh and all that. In our building, the same thing. You know, you had like a lot of Pakistani people too that lived in our building. And our neighbors weren't there either. The Pakistani kids, they went out. Their mother passed away, so we used to watch over them at that time. But I don't think they were there. I think they were left with their father to visit their family. But it was like a scary situation, and especially knowing because I used to watch the news a lot because my mother's stepfather, even though he was an idiot, he used to watch the news a lot. So I started watching the news. Even before that, I kind of used to watch the news because my grandparents, who were from Puerto Rico, used to watch the news. A lot of people, when they come to this country, they're more interested in the news. They want to know what's going on. So I kind of knew about the mafia wars, and when Yusuf Hawkins happens, and the other black kid that got killed, I was watching that carefully too. So I remember like yesterday. So I was already paranoid about going out there, you know. And I got so many stories about that neighborhood, but that's one story that was real crazy, and I was nervous. My stomach was twitching a little bit because I don't know if these kids are gonna come back. And of course, I might have to fight back. I'm 11 years old. I'm skinny, but I have to fight back. I'm not gonna let them, you know, especially in front of my mother. You know, I gotta protect my mother. You know, even though she's older, she can protect herself. And my mother's cousin was there. It probably would have went down kind of ugly, but luckily, they disappeared, and his sister left too. So we were able to walk him. And, you know, hopefully, you know, nothing happened to him. We never saw him again. He probably told his parents and they probably moved out. But we never saw him again. We lived there for a while. We lived there for many years after that. And on top of all the kids always picking on me and trying to start a fight with me, and then I'm seeing this, and it was crazy, but it was real crazy. Like Bensonhurst and Bay Ridge back then was like it was like the hood. It was like the white hood. You know what I'm saying? Back then you had white hoods in Brooklyn, and you just couldn't just walk there if you were of a different race, or if you were even from the neighborhood. You could be white, but if you're not from that neighborhood, they would chase you too. So that's when I realized, okay, these kids are not just chasing black kids, they're chasing white kids too. And you know, because he's an outsider to them, you know what I'm saying? And that's my introduction to the 90s. That's how the 90s started. But luckily, right after that, me and my mom went to Florida that same month. So it was kind of cool. It was that kind of calmed things down. Me and my mom took a lot of trips the next couple of months, and then later on that year in 1990, we went to Canada for the first time. Toronto. We stayed in downtown Toronto, and then we went to regardless of my stepfather brought his friends with him, but I like that. But the trips, the little things, those was kind of cool. So that kind of calmed me down that year. But even that year and going to school, it was, you know, it was all right. I mean, it was okay actually, but that's not how it started. You know what I mean? And it was a scary situation. You know, and luckily, none of those kids lived in my building, because it probably would have been more uglier. You know, so it was a scary situation all around, and it was tense. Like I remember, man, yeah, it was that we weren't in Bensonhurst, but just living in the border, it was that tense, you know, and it was crazy, you know what I'm saying? And you know, I got into it later on. You know, white kids used to make fun of me because a lot of the white kids in my school, not all of them, but a lot of them were smart and my grades weren't that good, so they used to pick on me and shit. So, but I got into it later on seriously with quite a few Italian kids in high school, and they don't care. They don't care, but, you know, I kind of got my revenge, not the way I wanted, but I got my revenge on one Italian kid that jumped me, and it's not the way I wanted to, but, you know, he got thrown down the stairs in high school and all that. But, you know, that was a long time ago. All that stuff is a long time ago now. I actually by accident 2 years ago, because they switched the B and the D trains. So I'm thinking I'm going to Midwood, just walk around. I ended up going, I didn't know. D train goes to Bensonhurst now. The B train goes to Midwood now. So I got off. I never knew Bay Park. We made that turnaround, and Avenue, Kings Highway, and every people made that turnaround around there. It's weird. I never knew that. So I kind of followed Bay Parkway, and then I jumped on Avenue O, because Avenue O goes through Bensonhurst. It stops and it goes to the other side, like I said. So I went around and I see the changes. Like at least that part of Bensonhurst, where you get close to Midwood, that's changed also. Like I still saw some Italian Americans, white people, but in general, but I saw an African American older couple passing by me. I seen a Chinese place and Chinese, and I see some Chinese people, and I seen a whole bunch of like Spanish kids, Mexican kids in the playground there. And wow, you would never see that back in 89, 90. You would never see that. So it has changed. Some of those changes in our community, my old neighborhood, not good, gentrification. But that kind of change is good. To see that, like, you can kind of walk through there and not get chased out. Even going up to the train station. Now, I don't know about the other side of the train station. That I don't know. And I don't know if the mafia is still around. They still around, but I don't know if they control that area like they did back then. But that was one situation that was kind of scary, you know what I'm saying? Like, because you didn't know what was going to happen when we came out. So that was crazy. And yeah, that was what's going on in that neighborhood, 89, 90, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was crazy. And luckily that never happened again. And you know, I seen other fights. I got so many other stories, but I'm gonna keep it short. I'm gonna stick with just that one, because that one is just crazy. I mean, they blocked the whole street. There was like 20 of them. You know what I'm saying? 20 of them, and almost 20. And yeah, it was, when people say the grimy 90s, like, you can't get more grimier than that. Cause them white gangs were and the Italian, especially the Italian gangs, they were grimy. They were fucking grimy. Excuse my language. I'm not trying not to curse on YouTube. Effing grimy. They was grimy. So, you know, we all good. Eventually, we moved back to we moved to Queens, and then Bushwick, and then eventually Williamsburg. So that's one story I have. I got like a couple. I'm gonna probably do a couple of videos today, but I'm gonna keep it on that. So yeah, peace.